The second concern I would like to briefly address is the relationship between religious arguments and secular arguments offered by citizens in the formation of public policy. Although there is an important and influential stream of political thought, often associated with Rawls and his many followers, that maintains that only secular arguments are permissible in the creation of law in a liberal polity, I'm not sure the distinction between religious and secular arguments is as easy to make as this tradition holds, especially on the issues that so deeply divide us today. Take, for example, the debate over abortion. The most sophisticated advocates on both sides typically zero in on one question: is the prenatal human being a moral subject? Those who defend the right to abortion, pro-choice advocates, will answer this question in the negative, but the specificity of their answer will depend on what they believe is the point in a human being's development at which it becomes a moral subject. The most dominant view in the literature is that human beings do not become moral subjects or persons until sometime later in their gestation, when they possess a level of organized cortical brain activity that suggests some primitive self-consciousness. This is why pro-choice advocates will refer to fetuses prior to this moment as human beings that are potential persons but not actual ones. Opponents of abortion, or pro-life advocates, with few exceptions, argue that the human being is a moral subject from the moment it comes into being at conception. This is because all human beings have a personal nature, even when they are not presently exercising the powers that flow from that nature's essential capacities or properties. These essential properties include capacities for personal expression, rational thought, and moral agency. The maturation of these capacities are perfections of a human being's nature, and thus the human fetus can be wronged even before it can know it has been wronged. No doubt, this view is tightly tethered to a particular reading of the Hebrew Christian scriptures that has been shaped by the development of a moral theology that employs the category of certain realist traditions in its theological anthropology. So there is a sense in which the pro-life argument is religious, but not in a way that seems relevant to the question of whether religious arguments should be excluded from the public square. Why is that? It is because the adjective religious contributes nothing to our assessment of the quality of the pro-life arguments. Arguments, after all, are either sound or unsound, valid or invalid, strong or weak, cogent or non-cogent. Their premises are true or false, more or less plausible, reasonable or not. It is not clear how labeling the pro-lifer's case religious, despite its theological roots, reveals anything about its quality, or even if the argument is or is not an example of what is often called public reason. Moreover, when a citizen's argument is labeled religious, it seems to serve the purpose of indicating to our compatriots that the argument is sub-rational and or without any real intellectual content. This was made plain to me 8 years ago after a lecture I gave at Texas Tech University's law school. During the question and answer session, an audience member, a professor at the university, issued this judgment of my talk: "You've presented nothing but religious arguments." I responded, "I'm relieved. I thought you were going to say they were bad arguments." Even though it is not always the case, it seems that it is generally true that when an argument is labeled religious, it is often perceived, rightly or wrongly, as equivalent to announcing that the position in question is not a deliverance of rational deliberation and or can never serve as a defeater to so-called secular arguments. It seems then that if one were to suggest that the pro-life position, because it is so tightly tethered to a theological tradition, should be sequestered from the public square because it rests on a religious argument, while the pro-choice case is perfectly acceptable because it seems to rest on a secular argument, what one would in fact be doing is creating a metaphysical exclusionary rule that seems suspiciously capricious. For what we are in fact discussing are two rival accounts on how best to answer the same question: who and what are we, and can we know it? It is not about two different subjects, religious belief and secular knowledge, the latter of which deals with reality, while the former is just a matter of opinion arising from non-rational sources. Abortion, however, is not the only contested issue about which this sort of analysis may be applied. These other issues include critiques of same-sex marriage, physician-assisted suicide, as well as defenses of morals legislation and full political participation of citizens informed by their religious beliefs. Given this reality, one should, I believe, be skeptical that attempts to distinguish between religious and secular arguments for the sake of placing limits on the former can advance in any meaningful way our political conversations on these contested issues. Thank you.